Okay, so we are in Perek Zayin. We are in chapter 7, and the shir is dedicated in honor of a gift by Marvin and Esther Huberman to the Beit Midrash dinner last June. We started this chapter last time, but just to refresh our memories, particularly since we had the week out last week. The end of chapter 6. Remember, chapter 6 had the attempts on the life of Nechemiah. Right? Multiple attempts to try to either lure him out of town to be attacked, or attempts to threaten him that there are rumors going around that he wants to be king, attempts to make him look bad, to lock himself in the Heichal, in the sanctuary. And then at the conclusion of the chapter, Nechemiah said, and we finished the wall, we finished the doors, and boy, were our enemies upset. They knew that this was from God, and their attempts did not stop. Tovia, we talked about last time, had a lot of friends among the Jewish nobility, and they would write letters. First of all, they write letters back to him to let him know what's going on, what kind of moves I was making. And they would also try to tell me good things about him, whether to win me over or whether to anger me that he has these alliances is disputed by the commentaries. But fundamentally, Tovia is still a thorn in my side. It's still a threat. And therefore, as we saw last time, the opening sentence in Perek Zayin, in chapter 7, if you're using the Stone Tanakh, you want page 1851, he says, we need to do something. Even though we have a wall, even though we have defenses, nonetheless, we better make sure that we appoint people to stand guard. And so in chapter 7, sentence 1, it says, Vayihi kasher nibnesa choma. It was when the wall was built, meaning completed. Va'amid adelasos, and I set up the doors. Vayipakdu hashorim v'hameshorim v'halaviyim. At that point, the gatekeepers, the singers, the Levites were assigned to their positions. And the last thing that we did last time was to ask the question of why these appointments are happening now. Meaning the gatekeepers, I understand, you didn't have a wall. What are the gatekeepers going to do? They can stand there holding a weapon. That's basically it. So I understand you need gatekeepers now, but the singers, why are they now in charge? And especially, Shoarim is actually usually understood as not the gatekeepers of the wall, but gatekeepers in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple, which has been standing for a long time before you get to this point in history. So we're about to talk about guards and shifts for the wall itself, but this line, and this is the way that Ralbag takes it and others, is talking about appointing the Leviim in roles in the Beis HaMikdash. And so the question really is, why is this here? Why did they wait until the wall was complete in order to appoint people to jobs that they should have been doing for decades? Question is clear, right? Debbie, you with me?
I'm with you, but wasn't there something before about not many Levites would come?
Right, so in Ezra's day, when Ezra does his aliyah and he looks around, he can't find any Leviim to come with him. And there were very few in Zerubbabel's aliyah from the original list. And Ezra issues a decree that if they don't show up, they'll lose their property and all of that. And that's the way he gets Leviim to come. But there are some, and certainly long before now, Nechemiah, remember, doesn't bring a large group of people with him. So last time round, we quoted the Zakheim commentary, and he floated the idea that actually, until now, these roles were filled by Kohanim, were filled by priests. And that...
What is a singer?
A singer, literally, the singing that every day there are songs that are sung as part of the service in the temple. No. Every day there are songs that are sung as part of the service in the temple. He's not a chazan. There's no congregation sitting and listening. It's simply part of the service is to have music. There were musical instruments. The Gemara in Sukkah describes them. We see them referred to also in Tehillim when we talk about in the beginning of various chapters of Psalms, right? The song is for the Shminit, some 8-stringed instrument. We talk about the Kinor a lot.
I thought it just referred to cancellation when it said singing.
Oh, no. There was singing. I mean, the Talmud even discusses the idea that this was a requirement of the service such that without the singing, the service is disqualified potentially.
It I've seen
Yeah.
it. I didn't really know.
Yeah.
Because when you see all that 3D, about you have seen the 3D representations of the Beis HaMikdash. They now have one at the Kotel.
Yeah.
And there's also one in the Music Museum that's on Orphan Yehuda Street.
Really?
Oh, you haven't seen?
No, that one I haven't seen. The one at the...
At the Kotel.
Yeah, the one at the Kotel, yeah.
Yeah, so the one at the Music Museum is different.
Uh-huh.
But that one has more of the music.
Well,
So it's one of these things where you wear 3D glasses and they have the
Really?
way of singing the supposed music.
that's neat. Off of Ben Yehuda, huh? Okay.
Yeah, it's on Schwarzenegger.
Okay.
Oh, it's an amazing music.
Dahlia recommends. TripAdvisor.
You see, I just presume since women aren't allowed to sing that they're singing that didn't exist.
Women can sing. I just can't listen to them. But in terms of what went on, no, the Gemara is very clear. It talks about the importance of simcha, of joy in your service of God, and it says, what is simcha? That's shira. That's singing specifically. So yes, that's another proof that it's not chazan, because it was happy. Rabbis and chazanim don't see eye to eye. That's a very old issue. That's a very old issue in halacha. And one of the best passages in the Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Chil Michal Epstein, who was the Rav in Novardok, is where he talks about the issues involved in music on Shabbos. And he mentions you're not allowed to use, it wasn't a tuning fork, but it was the equivalent of a tuning fork to get a tone. And then he starts talking about the chazanim of his day and how they use this, and they spread out their notes like it's some kind of a performance. And boy, is he unhappy.
Is it still like that today?
Well, I won't presume, because you know shuls that have rabbis and cantors, and I don't want to get in trouble. But very, very often there is a sense from the rabbinic side of it that the cantorial side is too much of a performance, it's too much about artifice, and that rubs them wrong. So Zakhai's argument is that until now, these roles, the music, the gatekeeper in the Beis HaMikdash and the temple, that's been done by priests. That's been done by the Kohanim. And Nechemiah, as we've seen, doesn't trust the Kohanim, because we just read about the alliances of the leadership with Tovia. We talked about the problem with them potentially, depending on how you read what went on in chapter 5 with the loans and taking advantage of the indigent, where it sounded like the Kohanim may be, depending on how you read it, part of the problem there. And so Nechemiah says, what I did now was I elevated Levium. The Levium were good. They worked on the wall. They were very positive. So I elevated the Levium instead of the Kohanim. The problem with that approach is, first of all, the Kohanim worked on the wall as well. We listed those who worked on the wall, and we had many more Kohanim listed than we had Levium listed. That's number one. Number two, these jobs were always Levi jobs. Why in the world would I think that we have no evidence. Nowhere until now in Ezra and Nehemiah did we see that the Kohanim played this role. So that's a weak explanation. So then the question is, so what's going on? So if you take a look on your sheet at source number 1, Malbim endeavors to explain. He says, Ad ata, until now, hayu ha-Leviim trudim bibinyan ha-choma. The Leviim were really busy in building the wall. And therefore, until now is only when they were commissioned in their roles. The weakness here is, again, they should have been in this role before Nehemiah ever showed up, before they started construction of the walls. Unless you're going to say there was disarray because of attacks and that prevented it, this is difficult to say as well. So I would prefer Ralbag's read. Ralbag's argument, and it's part of source number 2, is to suggest that this was actually about the assignment of extra positions. These were appointments to extra positions, not just the basic positions in the Beis HaMikdash, but beyond that. I'm going to come back to the Ralbag. We're not going to read it out yet, because I have to come back to him in a little bit, and we'll read it out loud then when it addresses the second point. But that's Ralbag's take. So he says, I appointed Levium in these roles in the Beis HaMikdash, and then in Pasuk Bet, Pasuk Gimel, sentences 2 and 3, again, it's page 1851, he says, V'atzaveh es Chanani achi, I instructed my brother, and again, brother is not necessarily brother, it's my ally, Chanani, he was the one, remember, from the first chapter, who brought the news that the Jews in Yerushalayim were under attack, as well as Hananiah Sar Habira, Hananiah, the officer of the capital, or officer of the palace, as Art Scroll translates it, Al Yerushalayim, I appointed them over Jerusalem, because he meaning Hananiah, Ish emes, he was as a man of truth, V'yareis Elokim, and he feared God, he revered God, Me'rabim. So last time when we read this pasuk, we didn't really understand 2 points. Number one, what is this emphasis on Yirat Elokim? If I need a guard, what I really need is someone who is Yarei the enemy. Right? I need somebody who's afraid of being attacked. What does being God-fearing have to do with being a good guardsman? That's number one. Number two, this word at the end, Me'rabim, is not easy to translate. The Art Scroll translates it as Me'rabim for a long time. Rabim meaning many. Me'rabim from many, meaning from many days, from many years. He was known for years and years. He had been God-fearing. And that's Rashi's commentary on it. Ralbag takes Me'rabim a little bit differently, and he says it means more than most people. That's the way that Ralbag reads it. Me'rabim, me, as a prefix, means from, but there are a lot of different ways it can work. And it can mean he was more God-fearing than most people. That's Ralbag. But my preference here is for Malbim's approach. Because
in Santino it says, feared God above men.
So
sort of like that, right?
Right. Well, that's
in other words, they were the most God-fearing. They Rabin, like the majority of the people.
So
fear God as much as they did.
So that could be Ralbag, but I actually think they may be leaning towards Malbim, what we're about to see, because Malbim not only explains the word Me'rabim, but he also explains why being God-fearing matters for this role. Take a look at source number 3, please. Could be. He's more qualified, right? That's the Ralbag read more than most people. But Malbim says no. He says, Rov ha'anashim yir'eh es harabim me'asos davar neged ritzonam. He says most people are afraid of the masses and won't do anything that's against their will. Avshu kidvar elokim. Even if they're told this is what God wants you to do, they're not going to do it if they think the community is against it. He wanted here to have somebody who would fear God and not human beings. Because you had all these people who are allies of Tovia, like we just mentioned. So he chose Hanani or Hananiah. It must have been confusing for people. So that he would have somebody who wasn't afraid of the masses. Yareis Elokim Me'rabim, feared God over the masses. Dalia.
So I almost feel like we have to do, like I go to Shoshana Solti's class.
Yeah.
We almost need like a chart of what Me'rabim could be.
Yeah.
Okay, because one is that you, because when here it says, he feared God above men. So here it makes it sound like you're the frumest person. Here it sounds like you're not scared of other people. You're scared of the masses.
Right.
Like you are a brave person. Like it doesn't matter what your fellow man thinks.
Right.
If you think it's the right thing, you're going to do it, not because you fear God more, but because you're brave.
Right. So the answer to me...
So I don't know what the Me'rabim is.
Right. The answer to me is really the chart that's necessary is the mem chart. Meaning, what does the prefix mem mean? And that dictates what you're going to do with this. If you take mem to mean from, meaning literally from, well, they usually use the term from, so then you have to take Rashi's approach. That Rabim means many years, a long time. From many years, he was known as being a God-fearing person. And that would be Rashi. Ralbag is taking the mem prefix as meaning more than. That's really the way he takes it, as more than. Me'rabim, more than many others. And Malbim is also taking it as more than, but he says it's not about fears God more than other people fear God. but rather he fears God more than he fears others. That's the trick. All three are grammatically correct reads. The advantage of Malbim, though, is that Malbim explains why Yirat Elokim matters in a guard. Yirat Elokim, being God-fearing, matters because it means he'll do his job. That's the way Malbim reads it. And, by the way, this fits the point that Malbim made in chapter 6, which is that chapter 7 is really an extension of chapter 6. The appointment of the guards on the wall is because Tovia in chapter 6 established himself as a threat. That's why the guards are necessary.
Can I just ask something about the palace?
Yeah.
Is this the palace in where he had come from? Or palace?
Which palace do you mean?
Officer of the palace.
Oh, Chasar HaBirah. So it's actually, I don't even know what to do with these. I haven't thought about it. But my easy answer would have been that Chasar HaBirah is local. He's not somebody who came with Nechemiah. But that he's somebody local. And again, I don't take Birah necessarily as palace, as much as it's the center of power. Right, Shushan HaBirah from Megillat Esther, since Purim's coming tomorrow night. That would be a way to take it. So Nechemiah appoints these guards, and he says in Pasuk Gimel in sentence 3, Va'omar lahem, and I told them, Lo yipaschu sharei Yerushalayim ad chom hashemesh. The gates of Jerusalem shall not be opened until the sun's heat, meaning midday. Ve'ad heim omdim yagifu hadlasos ve'echozu. And while they, the guards, are still standing there, they shall close the gates and they shall seal them. Meaning, don't leave the spot until you've closed the gates. And the appointment was of shifts of guards, dwellers of Yerushalayim, each one on his own shift, and each one standing at a spot parallel to his home, just like in the construction. We wanted people to feel personal responsibilities, so they built spots that were near their home, and now we're going to position them as guards near their home. But here's the interesting thing. You only open your gates at midday. That's really inconvenient for access to the city. No one can get into Yerushalayim all morning. Sorry?
It's not really according to marketing. You market in the morning.
Yeah. This seems really difficult. Clearly, the straightforward explanation of this is what Ralbag says, which is it's to avoid attack. You're afraid of being attacked in the morning, and therefore you seal the gates until midday. Rav Sajid Gaon has a very interesting discussion in source number 4. Rav Sajid Gaon, like a Barbanel much later, dealt with those who argued that the return for the Second Temple was actually the fulfillment of Tanakh's predictions of a time of Mashiach. There have been those historically who have argued that actually the second Beis HaMikdash, Second Temple, fulfills all the prophecies of Yeshaya, of Yirmiyahu, and so on, and that therefore there is no third one. There is no eventual Mashiach. Once you had the Second Temple, that was your shot. And now it's all over. Barbanel goes on at length to argue that it's not true. But Rav Sajid Gaon did it a good 500 years before he did. So one of the points that he makes is this pasuk. If you take a look at source number 4. V'haravi'i, the fourth point. Shesharei HaMedina hayiyu psuchim laila v'yomam me'havtachas hanichnasim v'hayotzim. He says, in the time of Mashiach, the gates of the land are supposed to be open day and night. And you're secure, you're not afraid of the people who are going to enter and exit. And he quotes you the pasuk in Yeshaya to that effect. Your gates are going to be open day and night, they will never close. Or they will never be closed. But he says in the Second Temple, they closed them before sunset while the guards were still there. And they didn't open them until midday, like we just read. So he says this insecurity is a sign that this wasn't the time of Mashiach. Dalia.
Well, I don't know. This puts a whole new perspective on the role of Levians.
Yeah.
I would look at the Levians as just the people who wash the Kohen's feet.
Oh.
Honestly, they sang in the Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden they're muscle men who build the wall. They're soldiers. They're guards.
So
they seem to be a lot more macho guys than my original picture, honestly.
So I hate
what Levium's role were. And now all of a sudden these are builders, they are guardsmen, they're a really different group.
I hate to diminish the Levium back to where you had them originally, but in the interest of honesty, they did help out with the construction of the walls. However, he's now not talking about Levium anymore. The Levium were the gatekeepers in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple. The wall of the city is not necessarily under them. That's the people who live in Yerushalayim who are responsible for being guards on the walls. So no, they're not guards. They may be muscular. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know.
There are macho flautists.
Okay, but the way they were saying is that they were too busy. One verse is they were too busy building the wall, so they couldn't do these other jobs.
Right.
So it sounds like he had a whole crew of Levium building the walls.
Right. If you accept that view, then yes, that would be correct.
It just puts a different light on
Okay.
this.
Look, I'm happy for the Levium to look good.
I'm sorry, who said that the second temple, the Mashiach, who's the one who did that? Not Theon.
The second Beis Hamikdash was Mashiach? Right, so those weren't ours. Those were people who attacked the Christians and the like, said that was the fulfillment. Those weren't the classic Jewish commentaries. They were not adopting that idea.
Oh, okay.
But those who questioned and challenged and said that maybe you don't have a Mashiach, maybe there is no Messiah, that's who took that position.
Oh.
Yeah. They're not our friends. So going back to source number 2, and Ralbag there, he makes the point, which I mentioned earlier, that the Levium were being appointed to positions in charge of the guards, but also he makes a point regarding the general practicality of what Nechemiah is doing. He says, the second benefit, the second lesson of this passage, he says, this teaches us an important lesson. Anytime you have a great task that needs to be done, appoint people who will oversee it to make sure it's done properly. And if you don't, it ain't going to get done. You need a contractor who's going to oversee all the people who are doing the work. So he said after they set up the doors, he mentions they appointed the gatekeepers, they appointed the singers, and that's in the Beis Hamikdash. But v'zachar gam kein shal kol mishmar u'mishmar hayarosh hamishmar lashkiach al mishmar shalo. He also mentioned they have heads of shifts who are appointed to oversee the shifts. So it's a little hard to read what Ralbag is doing here, but it sounds to me like he's suggesting that there were appointments of Levium to extra positions in charge of the wall's guards, and that this is important in order to make sure that what needs to be done is going to be done. That's Ralbag. Okay. That concludes the assignment of guards for the walls. And it leads us to the problem of Jerusalem. The problem of Yerushalayim, which is going to take us a few chapters to resolve, although the guts of it are going to take place in Perek Zayin, in chapter 7, into chapter 7. So let's read the opening 5 psukim, the opening 5 sentences actually not the opening 5, it's really just sentences 4 and 5 in the parak. We read the opening 3 already. Ve'ha'ir rachavas yadayim ugdola. The city was spacious, right? Rachavas yadayim is a phrase we saw already in Chumash. It means that it's very broad. The ugdola, very big. And there isn't such a large population therein. Ve'ein batim binuyim. That's a hard phrase to translate. The R-Scroll translation is houses had not been built. You didn't have a lot of houses yet in the city. You don't have a large population. You don't have a lot of houses either. We're going to come back to that phrase about the houses. We have to explain that a little better. But apparently that's a problem to Nechemiah. Vayitain Elokaya libi. God put into my heart, because remember, this is Nechemiah talking, he's going to execute a practical plan, but he's going to give all the credit to God as the designer of the plan. I gathered all of the chorim we've talked about before as the nobles, sganim, the officers. I gathered all of them and the nation lehit yaches, to establish their lineage. And I found the record of the lineage from those who came first. And I found the following thing written in it. And then we're going to get the long list, which we're not going to read out sentence by sentence. But sentences 4 and 5 set up a problem. And we need to understand what the problem is. What exactly is bothering Nechemiah about Yerushalayim, in which you can have a nice big piece of land, you don't have to worry about neighbors. Today it's very hard to get around in Yerushalayim. This is great. I'm happy. A nice spacious area. What is bothering him about the city of Yerushalayim being effectively too large for its population?
Well, it's obviously easy to conquer, and somebody else it's not safe.
Why is it easy to conquer?
Because if an enemy comes in, there's no population there to oppose.
Right, you don't have a lot of defenders.
Not a lot of defenders.
Right, and that's one way to take it, is you don't have a lot of defenders. That's the Da'at Mikra's explanation. I wrote it for you in source number 5. The approach brought by Professor Zer Kavod is Hayuv Gam Ha'omdim Al HaMishmar Mu'atim. Since you have few people, you also have few people who can stand guard. And the result of that would be that you can anticipate great danger to the city. Even though you have a wall. It's not enough to have a wall. You need people to guard it, and that's one approach. Mitzudat David gives you a more intense problem. It isn't just that you have fewer defenders. But he says, take a look at number 6. Lefisha ha'ir rachavat makom. City is spacious. And by the way, you look at the old city, we would not consider that by our standards to be spacious. This is not a very large city in terms of what we're familiar with. But it's large relative to the population in the city. So he says, the city was spacious. Utosevet biur amaru gdola. For added explanation, Nechemiah says it was large. The problem is then that people are far from each other. Your population is sparse. They can't communicate. Which means if there's an invasion at one spot, no one else knows. And then he adds, Ve'ein batim b'nuyim. Houses were not built doesn't mean there are few houses. Rather, it means that the houses are not built well. They weren't built with great strength, such that they could hide from the enemy in them. And because of all of this, they would need great protection. That's the consideration according to Mitzudat David. So we have a fundamental problem of a diminished city. Either way, whether I take Da'at Mikra, that it's simply I don't have many guards, or whether I take Mitzudat David, that it's about the fundamental vulnerability of people living far apart and not having fortress-like houses, the bottom line is, Nechemiah is afraid, and he says, but God gave me an idea. And the idea begins with me taking a census, because that's the solution to everything in Ezra and Nechemiah. Let's count people. So he says, I'm going to gather everybody, and he gathers the leaders. I find the move of gathering the leaders interesting. What's Nechemiah's relationship to date with the leadership?
Adversarial.
Definitely adversarial. Right? Totally adversarial. Nechemiah and the leaders do not get along. In Perek Hey, he took away their loans. In Perek Vav, he said they sided with my enemy, with Toviah. So why in the world, when he has a plan to defend Yerushalayim, does he bring in the leadership?
Are they living in the city?
There are some who live in the city, yeah. We talked about some governors who live there, yeah.
Right, because I always thought the important people lived in the city and the workers lived outside the walls. And so who owns the property there?
Right. So it could be that actually the population of the city would be like that. I'm not sure, because we talked about the people who worked on the walls living opposite those walls inside. So I think you have some people in the city who are also workers. Yeah.
Is that a good strategy to get your leaders to...
Right. So one way to look at it is you're giving them a role. And by giving them a role, that gives them their dignity. Right. You get them on board. And I think that's definitely one way that you could look at it. But Doz Akham has a different approach, which I think makes a lot of sense. Take a look at source number 7, please. Nechemiah assembled the entire populace, His populism previously had permitted him to rally the masses against the community leaders. Right? That's what he had done previously, like in chapter 5 with the loans. By assembling the hoi polloi with the elites, he ensured the latter's cooperation in the effort to populate Jerusalem, though any check of the records carried the risk for the rich that they might have to cede some of their property to poorer claimants. In other words, there's a risk for them in participating in this lineage, because part of the discussion is going to be who has rights to the land. And they could lose land. And they're not going to want to participate, not just because they don't like Nehemiah in general, but because they have something to lose. And so what Nehemiah does is, he gathers them along with the entire nation so that the population themselves can pressure them to participate. That's his game. It's a political game, as Zachariah reads it, and I think he's on the ball. So what exactly is he doing with this census? The only part that I think is weak in Zachariah's argument is that we don't find them use the census for the sake of checking the family records of land ownership. I don't know what his source is for saying that. That's not what Nehemiah is actually doing with the census at all. His game is a much simpler game. I'll tell you what it is, because it's not going to play out until chapter 11. Nehemiah's game is that he's going to take a census, establish the size of the community, and say that 10% of the people counted have to live in Yerushalayim. That's his end game, which is why he wants them all to participate. But that means there really is no issue of checking their land records. Why is he doing the lineage?
But don't people also have to live on the land that their tribe was assigned, and whatever? People had inherited lands that they came back to till, to farm, to take care of, and they can't just move on. They can't just move 10% of the people off their lands to guard the city.
So that seems to be gone in the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. Remember that you don't even have great representation from all of the tribes. Right? We're told that we do have some who come back from some of the other tribes. And basically, this is Yehuda and Binyamin who are showing up, who are the owners of this area. I mean, Yerushalayim is split.
They own the area outside the walls, don't they? I mean, there's a whole territory of Binyamin and Yehuda. Mm-hmm. And some of them are going back to their ancestral lands. They're not going to want to live near the Beis HaMikdash. They're going to want to go back to their ancestral lands, which are in the... I mean, we know how big Yehuda and Binyamin are.
Right. So we'll have to see when we get to Perek Aleph, when we see them actually do this. Maybe I don't have an answer right now. It's an interesting question.
Levium have no land.
Right.
They can all move in there. I mean, technically speaking, Levi was the only tribe not to get any land.
Right.
So for them, living in the city is just fine.
Right.
But for all these people, the other people, they don't want to leave their land.
Well, we'll see more about that. That we will get to discuss, and we'll even see a little bit of it today, because there's a Gemara that we're going to see that relates to the question of who wants to live in a city. That's a nice idea. So, Malbim takes this on a very straightforward level. Take a look at source number 8. Malbim writes, Uba'asher ein batim benuyim. Since they didn't have built-up houses, Ra'ah shalo yirtzu yashev be'ir shein ba diyurin. He said they're not going to want to live in a city that has no one living there. Sparsely populated city. He's taking the view of the houses as, literally, there aren't many houses around. To the point where he would actually cast lots, and that's what he did. He cast lots to get people to live there. If you're going to do lots, you need to know who's there. So therefore, he's going to do a census. And that's the simple read. But I think Dot Mikra, Professor Zer Kavod, actually has a different idea of the game that Nechemiah is playing. And I don't know if this is actually what Zer Kavod is thinking, or if it's just my read of what he is thinking. If it is what he's thinking, I give him a lot of credit. It's a brilliant point. Take a look at number 9. You tell me whether I'm reading too much into the words. He says, Nechemiah taha v'chipes eitza eich letakein pegam zeh. Nechemiah is thinking, how can I solve this problem of a sparse Yerushalayim? V'echlit latil chova al maaser adam liyeshuva Yerushalayim. And he decides he's going to obligate a tenth of the population to settle in Jerusalem. L'shem kach uchrach la'aroch mifkadam bechadash. So for this purpose, he needs to establish a new national census. Lehit yaches. Livdog et igrot hayachas, to check the letters of lineage. Va'al yedei zeh yavohu rashei ha'avod lehipaked. Those are the key words. And through this, the heads of the families will show up in order to be counted. I could be reading this wrong, but it sounds almost like the census is a gimmick. The census is a gimmick in order to get the leadership to show up, so that he can include them in his count of who's going to have to live in Yerushalayim. I could be reading that wrong. I could be reading too much into Zer Kavod, but I think that's what he's saying. But according to this, what Nechemiah is doing is he is going through the lineage of the families in order to fundamentally be able to determine who shall live in Yerushalayim, maybe to bring the nobles along with him. And then, going back to the Zakheim read, he has one other point, one other advantage here. Because he knows that Nechemiah is going to start with the list from Ezra chapter 2, from when Zerubbabel showed up. And he says, going through the old lists matters. Take a look at source number 10. These lists were also integral to Nechemiah's effort to provide the people with a sense of historical legitimacy and national cohesion by linking his activities to the past. They demonstrated that his activities were part of and culminated in the process of return from exile. You go with the old list in order to say everything we're doing, building the wall, setting up guard shifts, settling Yerushalayim, and all of that is all anchored in the Jews who came back when Cyrus allowed them to do so 3 generations ago. Everything we're doing extends back to the original actions of Zerubbabel, of Sheshbatzar, and of course of Ezra.
So I'm sorry,
yeah.
I just refresh my time frame here. So how many years have passed since Ezra?
So not much has passed. Not much has passed since Ezra.
I don't understand the 3 generations. Has 3 generations passed since the time that the 60 years?
So the question fundamentally is, we don't know how long Ezra and Nehemiah are after Zerubbabel. And that's why I give such a large number. We know that it's only a dozen years or so between Ezra and Nehemiah because they're both from the same king Artaxerxes, we believe, although there is some question, but that's a straight way to read it. And Ezra is in, I forget the exact years, you can look back in Ezra chapter 6 and 7, but Ezra is a few years into his reign, and then Nehemiah is, I think, is further along in his reign. So that part of it is relatively easy. The problem is in knowing how long it was from Zerubbabel until Ezra and Nehemiah showed up. And that part is much less clear. And that's where it's possible that it's decades in between Zerubbabel and Ezra and Nehemiah.
Why would it matter? I'm not being smart, but...
No, Dai asked the question. That's
no,
why.
I asked the question because all of a sudden in Ezra she's saying there were 3 generations.
No, he didn't say it. I said it.
Oh, you said it.
I said it. Those are my words.
But also give them legitimacy for the enemy. Why,
Right, because we go back to this original list.
And say, look, this...
Yeah, they didn't seem to care that much about that.
It gives you a deed.
Right. They weren't happy when we showed up either, though.
Yeah, but still, that gives you more legitimacy.
Right.
More
Facts on the ground.
Yeah.
So this is your problem. Yerushalayim is sparsely populated. We need to do something about it. So there's a very interesting question asked by Rabbi Victor Nebensal, which I throw in here, because it really could be here or it could be done in chapter 11, either way. Jump for a second to chapter 11, sentence 2, please. It is page 1863 in the stone. This is when they cast their lots. So here we find Vayivarechu ha'am l'chol ha'anashim ha'misnadvim l'sheves b'Yerushalayim. The nation blesses those who choose to live in Yerushalayim, indicating that those who are living there are not necessarily happy about the idea. So let's give them a blessing. It should all go well with your homes in Yerushalayim. I hope it'll work out. So Professor Rav Nevinsal, who's the chief rabbi of the old city, points to source number 11 on your sheet. Gemara at the end of Ksubos. This is the classic Gemara about Aliyah, about the value of living in Israel, the value of living in Yerushalayim, the debates classically about making Aliyah. So you have a line here which actually precedes that discussion. That discussion comes from a Mishnah. And the Mishnah at the end of Ktubot talks about what one spouse can demand of the other spouse. If, for example, a couple gets married and the woman is used to a higher standard of living and the man is used to a lower standard of living, she is able to say to him, you have to support me to what I'm used to. Because she didn't marry him in order to go down in her standard of living. Sorry? What if he can't? Get another job. But that's the rule. And then that leads to a discussion about what if he wants to move to an urban area and she doesn't want to go? Or they're living in an urban area and he wants to move to an outlying area, or vice versa. She wants, he wants, whatever, mix and match. And that leads to the discussion of whether one spouse can compel the other to make Aliyah, to move to Yerushalayim, and so forth. But this middle stage about the city dwelling is where you see this line. Minayin she'yeshivas krachim kasha. How do you know that living in a city is tough, that people don't like living in cities? And they quote that sentence from Nechemiah chapter 11, that everybody has to bless them. Clearly that means they didn't want to live in Yerushalayim. Now, there could be a lot of different reasons why someone might not want to live there.
Mainly because they have to protect the place.
Oh, well, protection.
Their lives are always in danger, and nothing has changed.
Right.
I mean, you look at the 20th century, and living in Yerushalayim is still scary.
Well, it's because of the driving.
Still more attacks, and still more terrorist attacks, per capita in Yerushalayim than there have been anywhere else in the state of Israel. So living in Yerushalayim is still, was then, today, it's a very desirable place for enemies to conquer.
Okay.
Enemies want this place.
Right. That's one issue. Another issue with being in Yerushalayim is that you don't have a water supply. Right? You don't have a natural water supply. You're forever vulnerable to siege. As a result of that, you have like the one trickle of water that you get in the Silwan. Good luck. That's going to support your city. And so that's another problem. A third problem is the obligations that you have in terms of Aliyah L'Regel. When people show up for the 3 Yom Tovim a year, you have to put them up in your home, and you're not allowed to charge rent.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. No, what's it? I'm blanking now. Airbnb, right? No Airbnb options.
Wow.
So, I would have thought about those.
You can't generalize about cities.
No, you can't. Yerushalayim specifically has problems. But Rav Nevinsal says that the commentaries there on this Gemara assume that the reason why people don't like living in cities is because they're crowded. And Rav Nevinsal says, then you're bringing me the wrong verse, because that verse is from a time when it was sparse,
right,
not when it was crowded. So what was your problem? So he offers a different idea. He offers another idea. He points you to source number 12. The Gemara in Bava Kama talks about 10 items, Asara Devarim, 10 items never Yerushalayim, which were stated regarding Jerusalem. And one of those is Ve'ein osin baginotu pardesim. You're not allowed to make gardens and orchards in Yerushalayim, chutz miginot v'radim shayim yimelsi anavim harishonim, except for this one garden that was around in the time of the prophets, in the time of Tanakh. But other than that, no. Ve'ein megadlin ba tarnagolin. You're not allowed to raise chickens in Yerushalayim either. Why not? So the Gemara continues to explain. Ve'ein osim baginosu pardesin. You don't make gardens and orchards, mishum sircha, which literally is because of the smell, meaning the fertilizer. That's one. And then, ve'in megalim batarnagolim mishum kachim. You don't raise chickens there because of sanctified items, meaning the chickens tended to peck around in the dirt and they pick up the creepy crawly creatures which communicate tumah. They communicate impurity. And then they can end up carrying them over to your produce, which is truma or whatever it is. It's sanctified. And contaminate it, make it tameh. So therefore they said, we don't want to have these things in the city. So Nevinsal says, well, that's really good in terms of preserving certain aspects of the city, but that means that your residents don't have fresh vegetables and they don't have eggs. Who wants to live? You're in Israel. You can't get shakshuka. You have no options. So Reb Nevinsal suggested maybe that's why they didn't like living in Yerushalayim at that point. But also then, as Dahlia points out, you can't extrapolate from that to cities in general. This is unique to Yerushalayim. This is not a concern that you're going to have anywhere else. So, nonetheless, I thought that was a really interesting point. This issue of why someone might not want to live in Yerushalayim.
Politically, is that still the case?
No.
In Yerushalayim, they're not allowed to have chickens.
Nope. No, I believe that. I mean, I don't know what the bylaws of Yerushalayim are. And I don't remember seeing. Keep in mind, this is the old city. I don't remember seeing any chickens running around in the old city. Lots of cats. This is true. Maybe that's why I don't see the chickens. But this is the problem. So what we've seen already today is that Nechemiah is, number one, dealing with a threat where he's afraid of Toviah and his crew. And so he appoints guards on the walls. And number two, he has a problem in Yerushalayim. A diminished population means that they have fewer guards and that it's sparse, and therefore people are at risk because the enemy could come in and you won't even know. So he says, God told me to make a census. Now, we talked about censuses in the very beginning of Ezra when we saw our first census there, and the fact that the Torah doesn't like censuses, right? This is the week of Parshas Kitisa coming up this Shabbos, and the half shekel. And we asked the question at the time, how could they have had a census? And our answer was that there are permissible ways to do censuses, whether the half shekel donation, where you just count the half shekel coin. Interestingly, I did not know about this. If I did, I forgot. But in this week's Toronto Torah, we have a column by Rabbi Weintraub talking about the Zionist shekel. You're familiar with this? So, in the early days of the World Zionist Congresses, in the beginning of the 20th century, when they had the annual Congress, they wanted a way to determine the population of each country of Zionists, that they could determine your delegation to the Congress. And so they set up a donation of what they called the half shekel. The half shekel was supposed to be enough to get a meal at a kosher restaurant in Warsaw. That was the amount. And the way they did it was, if you donated that amount, then you were entitled to a vote. And that was how they did this census. And they called it the Zionist shekel, or the Zionist half shekel, I think the Zionist shekel. And they did it for years that way, every year that they had the World Zionist Congress. So, if you read it, if you pick up Toronto Torah this Shabbos, you'll see the full column from Rabbi Weintraub. In any case, they have the half shekel means Shaul HaMelech used shards or stones in one case, or when he went to war against Amalek with the Haftarah this past Shabbos, he used sheep. So presumably they did their census in a way that was halachically appropriate. That's not an issue for us. But Nechemiah says, I'm going to do a census as well. And to do that, he goes back to the old list that he found from the arrival of Zerubbabel. As I said, we're not going to read through the entire thing, but there's a lot we have to talk about in terms of this list, some of which we'll do this week, some of which we'll continue with next week. But the big thing to notice, as you look at this, is what Nechemiah did not do. Right? What did Nechemiah not do here? What he didn't do is say, and I found the old list. Let's move on. Right? Instead, as he wrote his book, and as it was canonized by the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, he concluded sentence 5 saying, I found the following thing written in it, and he gave us sentences 6 through 70, where's the end of the old list? Through 68. which is not quite, but almost verbatim from Ezra chapter 2. Almost verbatim from Ezra chapter 2. So the question is, what in the world is Nechemiah doing? Why is it that he believes that this is an important thing to do, that the people need to have the census, not the people of his day? He's not talking to the people of his day. He's talking to us. Why does he think that I need to see this list again? What would you say? Sorry?
Maybe then people who stay Jewish, there's continuity.
Jewish continuity? But it doesn't say that they were still Jewish, right? It just tells us that they were Jewish the first time. He's reporting the old list, we think anyway. We have to actually come back to that and see if that's really true. But it sounds like he's talking about the old list. I mean, he lists the donkeys they brought with them. The donkeys are still Jewish, I guess. Donkeys can't be Jewish. Okay, no donkeys on the list. So, I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand what we're doing here.
Yeah, because it's Pasuk 61, and it says,
Yeah, but that was true in our original list also. That was true in Ezra 2 also. That wasn't new here.
I don't even know if some of these people were Jewish.
This is also true.
But the families actually survived.
Yeah, actually, go back to Ezra chapter 2, sentence 59. Take a look at Ezra 2:59. Going back to this verse that Dolly's referring to. Sorry, Ellen?
They survived.
They survived? Did they?
Well, maybe not.
Do we know?
Showing that.
Yeah, I don't know. But chapter 259 was the same sentence. And they couldn't tell you whether they were Jewish or not. Yeah.
This isn't got to do.
No then, don't know now. I'm sorry?
This isn't got to do with what I call This isn't.
I don't know what this is. I don't know what this exactly is. So we need to offer some explanations here. So I have a couple of approaches. First of all, Dad Mikra. Take a look at source number 13 from Professor Zer Kavod. I didn't translate it because I wanted to fit all of source 14 on the sheet. It's very worth reading. But I'll explain, obviously. He says, Umistaber, logically you would say, Shenishnis Kan, that this list is repeated here. Ki Nechemiah hutzracha l'shem hatalat chova shel ma'aser adam liyishuva shel Yerushalayim. Because Nechemiah needed it as a pragmatic point in order to be able to assign everybody to get the 1/10. But then he adds, V'odev shashnishnet hakan. It's also possible that it's here repeated. Mishum achiba sharachash hakotev la'olim arishonim. Because the author, Nechemiah, has great love and respect for that initial generation who came. And he adds in Ha'ara 2, footnote number 2, which I included there, called Kefal b'mikra l'chizuk. When things are repeated in the Torah, we often take it as strengthening a point. L'ziruz, to energize people, or l'chibah, as an expression of affection. And he gives you a Rashi that's an example of this. So it could be that this is repeated here in the book to say, we love those founders, the people who were brave, the people who came out of Persia / Babel and established themselves in the land. They deserve an encore. And so here in Nechemiah 7, with Nechemiah 7, we're going to give them an encore. And that's one explanation. And I think that's a fine explanation. However, I think an even finer explanation comes from Dr. Tamar Cohen Ashkenazi. And that's what I brought you here in number 14. And I thought this was brilliant. I have the book. I have to admit I didn't read it through. But Rabbi Chaim Angel, in an article on the name lists, references this work by Dr. Ashkenazi in number 14. And in the interest of time, because I look back and realize that we only have a couple of minutes, I'm going to sum it up for you, but read this. It's worthwhile. She says, if you want to understand the structure of Ezra Nehemiah in general, you have to look back at the structure of story. Stories have 3 parts. Potentiality, that's not her own idea, that's from somebody else who she refers to here. Potentiality, when you define what your goals are. Process of actualization, how are we going to carry this out? How do we carry it out? And then success. We've carried it out. Those are your 3 stages. So she says your opening 4 sentences of the book are potentiality. When Cyrus says, go back and build yourselves a temple. All the steps involved, building the temple and then building the walls of Jerusalem to protect the temple and its population there, that's all the actualization. That's your intermediate step. And then the rest of the book is about what she calls success. Now, the truth of the matter is, we're going to see there's not so much success in success. Nonetheless, that's her idea, is that there's success in the 3rd portion. And what punctuates the division of these sections, what frames them, are the censuses. You start your section on the actualization, stage 2, with the census in Ezra 2. You've now completed the construction of the wall. You repeat your census again. You're now moving stage 2 to stage 3. It makes a lot of sense. And especially because, and this is what she notes at the end of the piece that I excerpted here, there's such an emphasis on the people. Take a look at her last paragraph that I brought here. She says, intense emphasis on the people as a whole marks the opening scene and sets the tone for the rest of the book, meaning this last section. The people remain unequivocally in the foreground to the end of the book, except in the code of the last bit that Nechemiah writes at the end. The word people, occurs 13 times in the first 12 verses of this last section of the book in chapter 8. The expression all the people occurs 9 times in these verses. Each reference describes the people as actors or subjects. Such density of repetition has no parallels in Ezra and Nehemiah. It's meant to highlight the nation. So as you transition from part 1 to part 2, we highlight the nation. You transition from part 2 to part 3, we highlight the nation, and it's essentially punctuation in the book. I thought that was brilliant. So that's another explanation for why we reproduce the list. Nonetheless, we are not going to read every sentence of the list out loud. I recommend people do that at home, twice in the original and once in the Aramaic. But what we will do, God willing, is to spend a little bit of time talking about the major problem that this list poses, which is, even though it's copied from Ezra 2, there are differences between the 2 lists. So we have to talk about why those differences exist, God willing, next time. Thank you.